The Art History of Christopher Oleata. With a degree in fine art from UCLA, where I studied conceptual art and the postmodern perspective, I gained an understanding of the need to define my art historically, politically, and culturally, and what exactly the influences are. Part of the demand of postmodern critique is this necessity for the artist to know these things of themselves. With that in mind, I step out in front of the critique and write my own citation in the Encyclopedia of Art and Artists. As all things I do creatively, I first do it for myself and as a result, for you. Christopher Sean Oleata, born October 23, 1969 in La Jolla, California. As a child in the 1970s, I practiced illustration inspired by architecture, machines, and the ocean. I draw waves, castles, military aircraft, and construct great Lego cities on our pool table. In the early teens of the 1980s, I discover Cubism and Dada through the abstract concepts of Picasso, Braque, and Pollock. My good friend and tutor, Guy Fulkerson, shows me his Salvador Dali prints of the melting clocks and tigers with the stilt legs, and I pour into Dali at a young age. The colors of the Fauvists and Impressionists appeal to me, and I see the Fauvist exhibit in San Diego in the 1980s, but I am not yet a painter, so their impact is not great. As an illustrator, I am enthralled by modernism and the many-sided indecipherable objects of the Cubists, and I focus a lot on sculptural drawings like the kinetic sculptures of Calder. At age 14, I studied Chinese and Japanese art and Byzantine icon painting, finding many inspirations that continue even today. In many cases, it really becomes a study of religion. The Dada movement absorbs my creativity during the teens, paralleling the nihilistic emotional struggles I am having. Surrealism then gives me a great outlet to create some order in my mind. Dali is the major inspiration as I begin painting at 15. His extravagant eccentricities and classic mastery of the medium appeal to me, and I dream of being a great painter. Being of Native American descent, dreams play a major role in my life and art, and I chart and try to process my teenage nightmares. I also practice photography and work for the school newspapers and yearbooks, and as I use the camera, I remember Dali's statement that his paintings are hand-painted dream photographs. My 16th summer, I spend a month in Spain with my family, touring from Madrid through the entire north of Asturias. In Madrid, we visit the Prado Museum twice and the Picasso Museum to view Guernica. These visits solidify my desire and focus to become a painter and not an illustrator or an architect. Seeing the great Spanish masters like Goya, El Greco, and the spectacular Hieronymus Bosch painting The Garden of Earthly Delights are unforgettable. My last name, originally Oleata, is Basque, traced through the Spanish conquest of the Americas, and I focus on my Latin roots. On that same trip, we visit the famed Paleolithic caves of Altamira and view the paintings of the polychrome bison. Just 2 years later, the caves begin to fill with seawater and are closed to tourists. My first paintings focus on abstraction, with a lot of Native American themes. That year, I make a trip to Mexico City, where my father went often for business. We visit the great museums and view many revolutionary public murals by Rivera and Siqueiros, of movement in art that I would take part in later in life. We also visit the pyramids of Teotihuacan. That year, my art teacher, Richard Christensen, gives me great support in teaching me the basics of stretching canvases and painting as we begin to organize my portfolio to apply for the advanced placement exams to receive college credit. He shows me Georgia O'Keeffe and the pop art master Andy Warhol. They both die soon after that year. We make a trip to the LA County Museum of Art to view the David Hockney exhibit and his practice of surrealistic panoramic photographs while passing through their collection of postmodern installations and paintings. I have my own first exhibits. One, a solo exhibit of paintings in the La Jolla High School library, and another, a piece and a group show at the La Jolla Art Association. Those years of 1987 and 1988, I make the decision to be a painter, an artist, but I also have begun another path. I am playing drums in a rock and roll group called Fire with two of my three brothers, Patrick and Randy, and I write a lot of music on guitar. We play many clubs of San Diego on a weekly basis, record a short album, and I create dozens of pen and ink illustrations for the promotion of our band in the theme of 1960s concert posters. After high school graduation in 1988, I moved to Los Angeles to begin UCLA, but I soon quit and moved to Hollywood with the band to continue our dream of making it in rock and roll. I know already that to be an artist, I just need to make art, so I continue my art practice of painting and illustration in our small apartment on the Sunset Strip across from the Whiskey A Go-Go. I create representational paintings of the picturesque in nature, surrealistic castles, doorways, and two large cityscapes of Los Angeles and Hollywood that take nearly 1 year to paint. I expand on my practice by buying a 35mm camera and begin producing a lot of panoramic photographs to document and study the landscape and my experiences. Our family has always been active with sports and camping, and my brothers and I go hiking and camping often. But I am never interested in plein air painting, and I focus on creating large paintings at my home studio that take many months to complete. Those years of my early 20s, I create about 6 paintings a year, many drawings, and countless panoramic photographs. I also begin working as a decorative painter and faux finisher, working for William Pontrello, where I learn a lot of important technical skills, and I take part in large projects in giant houses of Beverly Hills and Hollywood. In 1992, after our music group breaks up, I begin again my studies at UCLA in the School of Fine Art and Architecture. I begin an undergraduate education in fine art under the strict rules of postmodernism and conceptualism. At UCLA, we are shown to be inspired by Bauhaus, The Armory Show, Rauschenberg, Rothko, Jeff Koons, Bruce Nauman, Man Ray, and the art group Fluxus. I have great teachers like the abstract expressionist painter Roger Herman and the visionary conceptualist sculptor Chris Burden. We are given the tools to create and the space to install and exhibit. The first year is a repeat of everything I learned in high school from Richard Christensen, so I am way ahead of the other students, having also created many paintings already. We focus on independent thinking and rigorous group critique, while often making class visits to famous private collections like the Broad Foundation in Santa Monica and the Fred Weissman Collection in Beverly Hills. I find a lot of inspiration in the process art of John Long and his documentation of solitary ritualized walks, and Ruscha's pop art. But I am self-taught outsider artist, creating representational art that goes against the status quo of abstraction. And I am a wilderness traveler, a camper, which is almost condemned by the urban art scene. I'm learning that being a mountaineer is the most misunderstood, esoteric, and avant-garde practice there is, a real performance art practice where death is always a possibility. In the end, painting could never compare to the experience of mountaineering. It is the pure practice of freedom, liberty, self-reliance, and adventure. It informs my art practice a great deal, and making paintings grounds me and gives me something to share with others. My direction pushes me more towards the sublime, inspired by German Romantic idealism, with paintings like the Hudson Bay School, Friedrich, Bierstadt, Rung, and the more contemporary and local California paintings of Diebenkorn. Once again, the study becomes more a study of philosophy and religion, another taboo of the urban art scene of UCLA or New York. This is compounded by some art and religion studies I complete at UCLA, focusing on the Native Americans, Buddhism, and Hinduism. During the 4 years at UCLA, I worked for UCLA Advertising, becoming the manager of the sign and display department, producing pop art projects like menu boards, point of purchase signs, merchandise display, murals, and supervise a team of design students in a rich environment of computers, tools, and hand fabrication. At this time, the UCLA Student Store and Food Services is the largest organization of its kind in the world, and I can say I produce every visual display of a sign, number, or word on campus. And since I am often able to model for clothing or school supply ads in the Daily Bruin newspaper, as people see me walking around campus in my faded dirty jeans, in my character as sign installer or art student, I am often stopped as I climb a ladder or walk a hall as someone asks, "Aren't you the Bruin guy?" I'd smile and enjoy the strange Hollywood conceptual character twist of it all. The summer of 1996, after graduation, as I'm engaged to be married, I have a solo retrospective exhibition at the Sun Cities Museum of Art in Arizona, curated by George Palovich, and then I move back to San Diego to look for a job and continue my art practice. My first job is as a graphic designer for a Monopoly game company, but I soon become tired of the use of computers and in producing pre-pressed digital files, of which I'm not very good at, and I moved into decorative painting and faux finishing, which is big business in San Diego. My marriage ends after 1 year when my wife tells me to get the hell out or she's calling the cops, and in 1998, I'm on my own. I worked for Thomas Byrne Interiors 4 years and become his project manager, crew supervisor, and project cost estimator. I learned many skills of the master artist, like gilder, muralist, plasterer, and furniture finisher, and I continue the necessary technical training not available with the conceptual art education at UCLA. My art practice expands greatly, and I produce many large paintings and exhibit often. This job enhances my art practice with advanced technical training, money to travel the world and explore my passion for mountaineering, and it surrounds me with other artists like Stephen Curry and Chris Riley. When I was a young child, I had a large children's book about how paints are made. The characters in the book are animals, working around the world in the many trades, bringing the various chemicals and minerals to the factories to make color and paint. This book was always in the back of my mind. In 1998, after the divorce, I was given a room for an art studio at an old ranch, the sand factory of Coast Sand in Rancho Santa Fe, owned by a friend of my father, Ken Bernard. After work, as I paint in the studio into the evening, I noticed that my bucket of nails had filled with water from a leak in the roof, and all the nails were rusted together as a mass. I saw the great rust color, remembered that old book from childhood, and I decided to harvest that rusty water to use as a pigment in my paintings. I made my first rust painting, a view of a caravel arriving in La Jolla Bay called Attack of the Locusts, Kill the Natives, Find the Gold, Take the Land, which is half coffee grounds and this new iron rust powder painted over a crackled gesso. I then continue rusting these iron nails in a few buckets of water, creating and collecting the fine iron oxide silt to use as a medium in painting. I create rust paintings, and I use this medium to produce the drawings on canvas and detailed underpainting to all of my work. At that point, I could produce a teaspoon a week, enough to make 1 or 2 paintings a year. But now, 16 years later, my rust factory is quite productive. Ken Bernard was also an avid book collector, and not just any books, old and extremely valuable antique books on art, architecture, history, and science. He stored them in 2 semi-trucks, of which he said I could go in any time and look at whatever I want. They were priceless. So there it was, out in the eucalyptus trees of the Coast Sand factory of Rancho Santa Fe, 2 semi-trucks where I could slide open the rolling back door, walk in, turn on the lights, and pull out books like First Dediction Shakespeare with handwritten notes in the margins by William himself, or large format etching books, hand-colored of Napoleon's first visits to the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, as I listened to frogs on the lake outside across the water from the Levi Strauss mansion. It was surreal. In 1999, I become the friend and partner with the artist Mario Torero, the son of the Peruvian artist Guillermo Acevedo. He is a well-known Chicano Park muralist and political activist, working in his medium he calls artivism. I began working as his assistant on public murals in Chicano Park and around San Diego, and we have many exhibitions together. Also, I am introduced by Mario to the visionary artist, musician, instrument inventor, historian, and all-around genius Oklahoma outlaw Jim French, where I begin a deep friendship as his student in many subjects. I learn the basic history and process of brewing alcohol and study the history of making of wind instruments. We focus on the making of ancient wind instruments of the California Indians and the modal determinate scales of the Greeks while learning some basics of harmonic theory. We practice what he calls flute archaeology, making ancient instruments while trying to decipher the mathematics of their scales. My first flute is an ancient Papago Indian three-hole fipple from Yuma, Arizona. My grandmother from Yuma, Angelina Santa Cruz, was a Papago. But my lessons with the amazing Jim French are another story. In 1999, my oldest brother Randy dies, and it is quite a blow to me and the family, but in a way, a relief. Now that his troubles are behind me, I can refocus both mine and his energy. I begin traveling, visiting my sister Robin in Mexico City, as she is on an exchange student program. I repeat that again, visiting her in Monterrey, Mexico, where we backpack in the cloud forest to a great waterfall. Next, I'm off to Brazil, visiting her twice in Rio de Janeiro, and those trips give me a lifetime of inspiration for my paintings and an almost endless collection of panoramic photographs. Over those years after my divorce and death of my brother, I saved $10,000, and in 2000 quit my job as a decorative painter and began a series of adventures that lasts nearly 5 years. By chance, after I quit Tom Byrne, I fall into a new job at the California Center for the Arts Museum as an exhibit preparator, which turns out to be a great thing by keeping me in the arts, learning new skills, and making money to extend the adventures. I am there at the museum, just 2 weeks before my trip to the Himalaya, when the Twin Towers are destroyed in 9/11 and the world goes to war and continues to be today in 2014. Over the years, I continually expand on my love for the wilderness, making many hikes and climbs in the Sierra Nevada of California, the Rockies of Colorado, volcanoes in Mexico City, and the incredible month in Brazil with adventures too numerous to tell. Each adventure, feeling my need for inspiration in my collection of panoramic photographs, grows as I learn the skills of international low-budget travel. But upon quitting my job in 2000, just after my brother Randy passes away, I go on a trip to the Himalaya with my father and his friend Jim Skelly to visit Mount Everest. From Kathmandu, Nepal, we fly over Everest to Lhasa, Tibet, touring ancient Buddhist monasteries while driving across the Himalaya. We see holy sites and countless ancient Tibetan murals on our way to Mount Everest Base Camp on the north, before driving back to Nepal. Next, we begin the long hike in the Solu Khumbu to visit Everest Base Camp in the south. After this adventure, I begin a project I created with Mario Torero called Pilgrimage to Machu Picchu, Cross-Cultural Arts Exchange, where we tour groups of artists through Peru. We paint many public murals, give lectures at the art universities on the Mexican mural movement, interview and film a long list of Peruvian master artists called the Los Maestros Project, lead the building of a Peruvian cultural center in the northern highland city of Santiago de Chuco for the House of Peru, help create the Lima Arts District of Giron Quilca with the artist group El Averno by muralizing 3 city blocks, and host exhibitions of our paintings in Lima and Cusco. Over the years, we have led several of these tours of Peru, where I include my own personal adventures, backpacking in the Cordillera Vilcabamba and Cordillera Blanca to experience the unexplainable magic of the high Andes Mountains. It took over a year, searching and taking some state exams, but I end up being a school teacher, working as a substitute for San Diego Unified. The small paycheck keeps me alive, and I really enjoy being around children and teaching. In 2004, after our 4th tour of Peru, I joined with my friend and surfboard maker Steve Bartow, at an industrial area of surfboard factories and begin renting a space as a studio. This is the key to truly becoming a productive, expanding artist, and by 2009 I have made nearly 200 paintings, with over 50 in 2008 alone. The travels and inspirations continue over these years as I visit Guadalajara twice to assist the artist Ricardo Virgin on his public murals in Tepehuaque and to view the Orozco murals in Guadalajara. While home in La Jolla, I continue my practice of training as a big wave surfer and as a mountaineer while visiting the High Sierra. All along I document and exhibit my work, selling pieces on occasion. But in 2007, another great change occurs when I meet the Italian woman, Dr. Marisa Roberto, a neuroscientist at the Scripps Research Institute. With her, I make many trips to her home in Volterra, Italy. Volterra is a city that for over 2,000 years has asserted an individual identity. When I am in Volterra, I stay on her family farm in San Cipriano, where the plants and friendships grow before my eyes. The secret ways of Tuscan life are expressed and revealed to me as I indulge the senses and enjoy the abundant love of my new Italian family. From every window I see the fertile ridges towards the hilltop medieval city with its receding cliffs where history and memories hide in the sand. I begin a new body of work of Volterra Landscapes, and in December 2008, during a Christmas visit, I have a solo exhibition in Volterra. With these new paintings, I express the hidden memories revealed in the earth, plants, and portraits of the people. I walk the farms, the fields, the homes, and the many twisting roads to observe the vast panorama that encompasses all that is Tuscany. With each day and season arrives a new expression of Volterra's glory and grace. With the changing grain and light, I experience a new angle and hue of the rich and evocative city, Volterra, the heart of Tuscany, the heart of Italy. There are chances to visit Siena, Pisa, San Gimignano, and other small towns in Tuscany. At nearly 40 years old now, my art practice has continually expanded and grown as I clarify the content and concept of my work and life and share my creations with the world. Now that we have the interest and support of the city, we plan another exhibit on my third trip during the Medieval Festival in August 2009. With this exhibit, I transport over 20 full-size paintings, and it showcases my talents well and established me as one of the great painters of Volterra. In 2009, I visit Chicago and the famed Art Institute, where I am able to see many great paintings. As I have begun to produce portraits, the Art Institute's collections of portraits are an important inspiration and training. At the Field Museum, I see a California Native American flute, the only one that exists of its kind, and it is this flute that my teacher Jim French and I have been making and studying, so it was great to see and photograph it myself. Now, for the next 2 years, my goal on the visits to Volterra is to transport the tools needed to stretch canvases and as much art as possible, spending my time on the farm building stretcher bars and the large collection of paintings and prints for the future. We visit Volterra in May, which is the best time because the many plants and flowers are exploding throughout the countryside. I study the plants, views, and amazing light. It is a strange dream. The next visit in September 2010 is a great one. I buy wood on the first day, but then am free to travel by train to the Valtellina Alps above Milan to camp in the forest for the night. The trip ends after 1 day because the winter rain arrives, but now I know the way to the Rome path and the high passes of the Alps. Upon return to Volterra, I continue building and stretching paintings before a 5-day trip to Paris. Of course, the trip to Paris is very inspiring, and it helps me focus the intent of some of the latest paintings while visiting the Orsay, the Louvre, and walking all over the city. At the start of 2011, I am in full production of a few commissions for Volterra, and more paintings for the exhibit we hope to have in May. We have a wonderful visit to Volterra in March, and then take the train to Milan, traveling up to Cernobbio on Lake Como for a conference. It's my own grand tour like the artists of the past, as I am able to see the great Italian masters in the hidden corners and museums of Italy. In May 2011, we host Volterra Neuroscience Conference and a spectacular exhibit of nearly 40 paintings. My parents are there as well, staying on the family farm, and on the last few days we go to Cortona for 2 days, and one night which is spectacular. I visit the Signorelli Museum, a classic Renaissance master. In the second half of 2011, I continue paintings with several themes and large formats with The Annunciation, Tuttle Creek, big La Jolla landscapes and seascapes, and assorted Volterra scenes. What is so exciting is the chance in the summer to climb in the Sierra, finally summiting Mount Corcoran. To end the year, we go to Washington, D.C. in November, where I tour the many museums on the mall, studying the great collections and directing my focus for the future. After 5 days in D.C., we continue on to Florence, Italy for another conference. We are put up in a spectacular hotel, and the meeting is inside the Uffizi Gallery and Palazzo Vecchio, so I am able to privately view many classics like Da Vinci, Botticelli, and Michelangelo. During the private tour through town, we visit the private Vasari hallway, seeing the largest collection of self-portraits that spans over 100 years, and in the end, a silk factory that teaches me a great deal about color, light, and the techniques of the old masters. From there, we continue to Volterra for 5 days, which is always wonderful. In the Church of San Lino, which I had never seen before, I see a wonderful chapel. The small chapel with high ceilings is from 1412 and decorated with amazing frescoes from top to bottom, including a fine oil painting behind the altar. It's now my favorite place in Volterra, and since it's usually empty, I can study the medieval frescoes in quiet and peace. December 2011 brings me to a focal point in the cycles of production. The last 2 years in particular brought me to see many of the greatest collections of art around the world, and I studied deeply many of these collections, movements, and individuals in books and in person. With that, I'm at a focal point. I am able to point to several themes and directions clearly forming now and for the future. Of course, it begins with my home in the spectacular city of La Jolla, California, where many of the great themes of conquest and destiny form themselves into big scenes of this landscape. Next is still California, but formed within the powerful practice and experience of alpine mountaineering and the singular spiritual esoteric experience that it is. Now, after 3 backpacking trips in the Alps, I begin to paint those visions. With that, I spill into classics like waterfalls and wonders of the world, with cityscapes and assorted scenes. This leads to the entire Italy project, which is a wealth building into the future. Where the subjects veer with the recent reflections of classics and old masters, we have the Pilgrimage Project. It turns to biblical themes and mythology to reflect in a postmodern eye the life experience. The new projects that have been forming for several years, but now have been actualized with a few pieces, is the Liberty Project. It formed after a recent viewing at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. of the Magna Carta, Declaration of Independence, Constitution, and Bill of Rights, where I wonder and struggle with our fate as free citizens. In October 2014, as I turned 45, I just returned from my 18th trip to Italy and another conference after visiting the family in Volterra, this time in Rome. As usual, I have a private tour of a museum, this time the Borghese, beginning with the Caravaggio room and continuing on from there. We return home to get right back to work and the struggles of life in a world and country that feels like it has been at war my entire life. I read and study the words and teachings of Jesus and the Buddha, and I focus on my family each day as life feels like a sort of battle between a great serpent. I sort out what is important. Just make a great painting. God is in the details. Painting is the process of prayer that reveals God. Painting is the process of the adoration of God through prayer. Painting is the process of looking closely at life to meditate and see more clearly the abundant miracle of life. Painting is the process of meditation to escape the mundane struggle of life, to be free from its burden and pain. Painting is the process of searching for an infinite moment of peace through the contemplation of the divine. Painting is the process of extreme focus to obliterate the confusion and distractions of everyday life. Painting is the process of having purpose in life, to touch people with a vision for generations to come. Painting is the process of revealing prayer through craft and the production of an object to share the experience of that prayer with others. Painting is the process of an unselfish act of sharing a visual dream. Painting is the process of creating positive energy and hopeful prayer reflected in a visual recording to be experienced by others. Painting is the process of creating a two-dimensional object of an ambiguous moment that is a doorway for the viewer to experience their own unique and infinite private experience.